no matter how right the strategy is, if you don't have alignment, it's going to fail.
Welcome to Real Leadership, the show that cuts through the clutter to spotlight leaders who make, move, and process things in the real economy. This isn't about buzzwords or theories. It's about bold decisions, solving challenges, and the strategies driving industries that matter. I'm Jim Weaver, CEO of the Owner Group. In every episode, we get real about what it takes to turn vision into action and obstacles into opportunities. Let's go. Today, we're exploring a fascinating juxtaposition. How does a lifelong conservationist and avid fly fisher end up leading the charge at a global plastics manufacturing company? Our guest today realized that to truly protect the pristine water she loves, she had to swim upstream to tackle these issues at its source, stepping right into the belly of the beast, so to speak, to transform it from the inside out. Katie Distler is Chief Sustainability Officer at Technimark, a global leader in injection molded plastics for healthcare, consumer, and industrial markets. For 25 years, she has been turning purpose into action, helping businesses align growth with environmental and social impact. Drawing from her entrepreneurial roots as founder of Distler Consulting and her front row seat to bold, value-driven leadership during her time at the helm of Ted Turner's Family Foundation, she brings a cross-sector perspective that blends big-picture vision with practical execution. Today, she drives Technomark's ambitious global sustainability strategy across their three core pillars: people, planet, and product. Under her guidance, the company has tackled massive 2030 goals, including a 42% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and achieving zero waste to landfill certifications across its manufacturing sites. Her groundbreaking ability to bridge the gap between environmental stewardship and industrial manufacturing recently earned her a spot as one of the top 25 women chief sustainability officers and a notable leadership in sustainability by Plastics News for 2025. Katie, it is a thrill to have you on Real Leadership. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
So I want to wind back the clock to get us started here. Going back to your days at the University of Georgia, you graduated with a Bachelor in Science in Forest Management. So where does this love of wild places come from for you?
I really think I was born with it. There's nothing, I initially thought I wanted to go into veterinary medicine, but so there was, from the very beginning, a love of wildlife, a love of conservation. I think I was luckily exposed at an early age to the outdoors. I had experiences fishing and canoeing with my parents. I think also I have a very strong Christian upbringing and really latched onto the idea, and I think this is prevalent in most all of our religions, that we are really responsible for this planet and responsible for things that are maybe more vulnerable than we are. And so really early age, I had that baked into me, and then just started going as hard as I could in that direction with an interest in protecting the world around us, not only for us, but for future generations.
It just struck me looking at your background, you probably knew pretty early, at least directionally, where you wanted to go. When you graduated college, what did you want to do at that point? And then could you have ever imagined being in the role you're in now?
Yeah, so no, I never imagined I would be heading up sustainability for a plastics manufacturing company. I think when I came out of school, I knew I wanted to do something big in this space, but for me, that meant starting in the field. So, one of my earliest jobs, and of course, when you're the lowest person on the totem pole, you get these jobs, was like literally going out catching snakes and turtles and doing bird surveys. And this was for a forest products company, for them to understand what they had on their properties so that they could do a better job managing their operations. And I quickly realized that while that experience, being on the ground, working with other biologists, was important to me, I needed an international perspective on this movement. And so very quickly picked up and moved to Washington, D.C., because where else do you just put yourself in the middle of everything? Talked myself into, didn't know what I was going to be doing, but talked myself into a position with the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, where then I was handed a whole portfolio of investments around bird conservation globally, and then started working with government agencies and private companies like Exxon and Shell and others, and to really think about how can we partner and make a greater impact than any of us together. So I knew very early on that I wanted to go big and go broad and not just be more of a generalist, but I started in the field intentionally.
You mentioned the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and then you spent 8 years in the Turner Family Foundation, which is interesting. Had a nice run there, ultimately serving as the executive director. So it looks like you thrived there. What was it about the Turner Foundation that was a good fit for you?
Well, this is kind of funny because I fell into that role. I actually didn't really want the role of leading their largest funding program, which is where I started there. I went to talk to at the time, their executive director, to help me with getting some connections inside some corporate entities where I could drive sustainability from the inside out, which is what I'm doing now. But out of nowhere, he offered me the role to come in and lead their largest funding portfolio, which I think at the time was maybe like giving away $25 million a year globally. And I paused because that was actually a smaller dollar amount than cumulatively what I was helping direct at National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. And it felt like a lateral move to me. I mean, yeah. Who pauses at going to work for Ted Turner? And I said, give me a couple weeks, because it just wasn't, I was thinking corporate America. So I went and started thinking about it, and I'm like, wait, okay, this gives me an opportunity. And back in that time, we didn't really talk about influencers, like brand influencers, but that's what TED is. And so this gives me an opportunity to work for somebody who is very visible and very bold, and I knew enough about their grant making to know that I could deploy any tool in the toolbox in terms of our funding to accomplish what we wanted to fund. And so that was attractive to me. And then also recognizing that I could get anybody to talk to me and explain issues to me and help me in my very difficult job of making hard decisions about what to support.
Because you were with that organization.
Yes.
Sure, that makes sense.
Yes, because of who Ted was and is, and who the family was, and their whole mindset around change and impact.
What is their whole mindset around change and impact?
I think I remember, Ted has, I think he even made bumper stickers that said this at one time, was basically this mindset of save everything. and then the staff kind of comes behind that and says, okay, we have to have a strategy, and we got to define what this means. But recognizing that, kind of back to my original passion for getting into this space, that this is one planet. This is one life, and we cannot avoid to mess this up. And I don't care what side of the political aisle you sit on. I don't care who you are, where you come from. We all have to join forces, because these issues are bigger than any of us combined. And so the board itself is Ted and the family, 5 children at the time. Jane Fonda was on the board also. And everybody had a lot of different opinions. But at the end of the day, and Ted would say, I'm just one banana in the bunch. It was the focus on making a big, impactful move with every dollar that we put out there.
So, yeah, it was kind of unique because it's governed by, it was governed by a board composed of Ted Turner, his children, his grandchildren. So what was the key for you navigating that multi-generational family-governed board dynamic? That must have been interesting. To say the least. I don't know, or maybe not. Maybe it was a dull bunch. I don't know.
It was not, and they are not. And it's fun because the grandchildren who now, some of which are serving on the board, were like being born and were very young when I started, but would still show up and be involved. So it was mainly just the kids. But the grandchildren were learning all along.
They brought the young grandkids to the board meetings, and they were involved.
Well, they would come in. I mean, they weren't, because of their ages, they weren't necessarily sitting through the whole things, but they certainly could. I mean, these board meetings were happening in family rooms at different properties. It was a true family operation by every sense of the word. I mean, we're sitting at Ted's property at Avalon in Florida, on couches going through this. And so very family oriented, very close-knit, very small staff at the foundation. It was important for me when I first came in to get to know each of the board members because they all came to the foundation with different passions and different things that were important to them. They all had different careers. And so really figuring out what mattered to each one of them was essential. And then I learned through that job, probably more so than any other role I've been in, is to really pay attention to quiet dynamics that are unspoken and going on. And so that you can see who's agreeing with who and who's not. And so you can anticipate when you might have some issues or maybe need to explain things in more detail or maybe need to have some conversations prior to board meetings. So really reading the room, but more so stepping back and doing that even before you get to the board meeting.
I bet that helps you today too.
It does. It does.
I bet it does. Yes. And so prior to taping, you mentioned an experience involving a presenter that you scheduled who kind of froze up, and we thought it'd be good to share. So unpack that for us. So set the groundwork. The listeners weren't in on the earlier conversation.
So as I mentioned, our board meetings were normally just the family and Ted and his 5 children, and a couple, 3 or 4 staff members. And very rarely would we bring in anybody else. We didn't have any independent board members, and rarely did we have speakers. They started doing that later on, but in the early stages when I was there, no. We brought in a very high-level, experienced grantee to talk to the board about a major issue of importance, and this involved travel logistics, him flying there, rental car, all that. He had a 35-minute presentation ready to go, teed up. So he gets there, and of course, I'm used to working with this family, but not everybody has that access. So he came in, and we were unfortunately behind on timing, and lunch was starting to get served. And Ted just looked at him and said, "Glad you're here, but we need to wrap this up. 3, 4, maybe 5 minutes. Let me know what you want to tell us." And the guy just froze. He totally locked up. He made it through quickly. I'm sure he wasn't real pleased with what he did. But that moment, even so many years ago, has stuck with me because it wasn't about expertise. It was about adaptability. And so great leaders don't just prepare well, they have the ability to adjust in the moment and still deliver. And so the ability to think on your feet and be clear and turn on a dime was something I've never forgotten out of that experience.
Yeah. It's one thing to say you need to be quick on your feet, able to turn on a dime. How do you make sure that you are able to do that? What are some practical ways that you get yourself to a spot where you're able to pivot like that?
Well, first of all, I will say I've learned more than once not to BS, to not try to talk your way through something, to not try to make somebody think that you know what you're talking about. If you have to pivot, if you have to adjust, and to be very upfront and say, I don't have an answer, but I will get you one by X time. But for me, being able to distill down a lot of information into sound bites really comes, if you go back to my scientific background, tons of very complex, detailed research and understanding how to sell that to different audiences. And so not only knowing your stuff, but saying, if I had to boil this down, and this was before the days of AI and ChatGPT of like summarize this into one sentence, this was how do I market this to no matter who I'm talking to, and how do I do it quickly if I have to? It's just really knowing the issues well, but also knowing when to speak up and say, I have no clue.
Yeah, and having seen that happen, just knowing like, boy, if I got a 30-minute something prepared, I better be prepared to do it in 2 minutes. I need to have that answer. I think writing, that's something that I'm not a writer, but I like to write just to get clarity on thoughts and organize thoughts. I think that's helpful as well. But wow, that's... Have you kept in touch with that guy? I think you said it was a gentleman that froze up.
Yeah,
how'd the relationship go after that? Was it all over?
Oh no, and we continued to support the good work, and he went on to continue doing great things. So, but I mean, a lot of these take homes for me too were that, I was working for a foundation, so essentially in the nonprofit sector, but the way that we ran the foundation and the way that Ted ran board meetings were like a business. And so it gave me, before I actually stepped into businesses, it gave me that experience.
Understanding your labor market is crucial for successful recruitment. Onin Staffing's Recruitment Strategy Guide provides insights specific to your geographic location and the positions you're hiring for. Our Recruitment Strategy Guide delivers a clear snapshot of your labor market and actionable intel to tackle market-specific challenges. With Onin's expertise, we help you navigate and win in your competitive landscape. Empower your recruiting process with the insights you need. Learn more about Onin's Recruitment Strategy Guide at oninstaffing.com/strategy.
Okay, let's shift to Technimark. Let's bring it up to today. So what does Technimark do? I mean, I know, we know plastics, but expand on that a little bit. And then how are you unique?
So Technimark is a global manufacturing solutions provider. And as you mentioned, we work across the healthcare, consumer packaging, and industrial markets. And one of the simple ways to explain what we do is if you take a product, we start, and if you just have the idea, we take that all the way until you have something that you're holding in your hand. And so, we can certainly play the role of contract manufacturing, just turning out products, but what really distinguishes Technimark is how early we can and do get involved. So a customer can come to us with just a concept, and we work with them to design it, to engineer it, to build the tooling, to manufacture it, to assemble it, the whole process. And at the center of that is something called injection molding, which is when we take raw plastic and create really precise products at scale. It's kind of like a highly technical version of a waffle maker, if that makes sense. Yeah. And then, and if you pull back, if you zoom out a little bit, when people talk about the plastics industry, what this is involved into is advanced manufacturing, where we are sitting at the point where raw materials become real products. And today it's less about just churning out the parts, but actually working with customers to design, scale, and deliver solutions. In addition to all of that, we own our own mold building company. And we also, this is something I'm really proud about, have a vertically integrated recycling company named Wellmark that recycles almost 60 million pounds of plastic a year.
60 million pounds of plastic?
Yeah. And we can do more. And keeping that plastic out of the environment, out of our landfills, and still in the economy. So that's, with my sustainability hat on, really, really key. And another, it's really fun to think about how far this company has come. It was started in 1983. The founder, his son is actually our current CEO and president. And we've grown to close to 5,000 employees globally in the US, Mexico, Europe, and China. And we're making everything from the everyday packaging for products made by brands that you know and love to critical medical devices. So in terms of impact, everything from convenience to genuinely life-saving impact. And we talk about our purpose as we make what makes life better. So that's Technimark in a nutshell.
It's easy to underestimate the positive, plastics kind of, I don't know, these maybe don't have a great surface reputation, but I mean, plastics are in everything. I mean, really critical to our lives, our livelihoods. So, it's really a pervasive thing, but how do you, you've got 25 years of environmental leadership, including your time with Turner Foundation, wildlife conservation. So what made leading sustainability for a global plastics manufacturing company the next right step for you? How did you find yourself here?
I am always looking for a challenge. And the other thing that is really important to me is not believing there's one side of the story. And I've always, in all of my roles, made sure I'm getting lots of different perspectives and understanding the complex nature of industry and the things we rely on. And really, there's no industry that isn't having an impact. But first of all, on the surface, there were a couple things about this company that I knew I wanted to get in a company like I did originally before I took the Turner job and drive sustainability from the inside out. And I knew I wanted to do that. I just wasn't sure of where I wanted to do it. And when I was introduced to the CEO of Technimark, I knew I wanted to work for a company where sustainability was not an add-on, where it was in the fabric of the company, corporate responsibility baked in. And this is, even though we're private equity owned, this is a family business, how it still operates. And it's very flat in how we operate. So that was attractive. The opportunity to learn about a lot of things that I had no clue about. I mean, I was bringing a lot to the table, but I had a huge, and still do, a huge learning curve. And so that was attractive. And then for me, to your plastics question, coming from the environmental community, as you said, plastics has been demonized. Plastics have been demonized, and so is oil and gas, and even at one point, forest timber companies. So everybody's going to take their turn. And we do have a huge problem with plastic waste, and I'm not trying to downplay it at all. But for me, the challenge was so appealing to get inside a plastics company and say, what are the key drivers for change? And how can I help bring those about? And in order to make change and make an impact, you need to understand these businesses. And a lot of people I've worked with in the past have grand ideas and advocate for very aggressive positions with a lack of understanding of true business. And that's not to diminish the work of the environmental community, but the smartest people in that community understand business and understand how to get things done in that environment.
Yeah, the ultimate outcome with these challenges is to seek the win-win, right? And you mentioned this isn't a partisan issue earlier. You talked about seeking both sides. And I think a lot of the things that are frankly idiotic on both sides of the issue are when folks get too tribal, like when it's throw away any environmental concerns at all, or going back to the Stone Age or whatever to save the planet. Like, it's not pragmatic. And I think there's a better answer in between the tension of those two poles in many cases. So you come from this background with I can see you with fly fishing gear on in my head, and you're coming into a machine that is really fundamentally designed to consume massive amounts of energy and output plastic. So how are you able to bring a conservation mindset to that context and actually move things?
First of all, I wasn't starting from scratch with Technimark. This was there from the very beginning. So this isn't about me. This is about a company that had this mindset of not only, reducing our environmental impact, but continuous improvement and linking that focus to just making good business sense and linking it to the value of the business going forward, and linking it to reducing risk. So this wasn't trying to say, okay, now what do I do? It more was about coming in, and I was the first full-time position in this role dedicated to kind of responsible business across people, planet, and product. And so that meant listening to all of our stakeholders, our employees, our customers, our owners, our investors, understanding the advocacy community, understanding globally, especially in Europe, what's happening with regulations, what's on the horizon, and then saying, what's material for our business? What's important to our stakeholders, and designing strategy around that. And this goes back to learning early on business instinct of saying, I come from a world where I was always seen as kind of a cost center, a cost. With philanthropy, you're giving away money, you're not making it. In the nonprofit world, you're having to raise everything. And I didn't want sustainability at Technimark to be viewed that way, or even as a compliance function. So that's when you start thinking of, okay, our energy spend is our second largest spend below labor costs. So, sure, we can talk about emissions, reducing our climate impact. And that's going to be important for a lot of reasons for our company and the world around us. But if we can reduce the amount of energy we consume, if we can become more efficient, and if we can transition to renewable sources, that's just going to be a win for our bottom line, for our EBITDA. And so framing everything through that lens, even in the people space, looking at employee retention and turnover and all of that can be tied down to either hurting or helping your valuation. And that's the mindset that I feel like works best at Technomark. But that being said, I have a CEO and a board that has mandated the importance of this in our company.
Yeah, so you're not just greenwashing things there.
No, and I knew when I took this role, and I report directly to our CEO. So that tells you something. It doesn't tell you anything about me specifically, but it tells you that my role is not buried.
So you're owned private equity by private equity family, right? So, and typically private equity is all about quarterly value creation, MOIC, return on invested capital, so is Oakworth simply willing to make less money in order to hit the people and planet goals? Or have you guys actually, because you have some very aggressive goals, which are very admirable. Are you finding that you're having to compromise on the bottom line growth in order to hit those, or have you managed to? You guys think you can hit all three?
So it's Oak Hill Capital, and then it's also Pritzker out of Chicago, who secondary owner.
Did I say Oakworth? I'm sorry, Oak Hill.
No worries.
Yeah, okay.
I think we carefully designed our strategy around good business sense. Now, that being said, we've had to just spend some money in some areas. But I argue that where we're just having to spend the money is there's also a benefit there in that we are reducing or mitigating risk. And there's a cost there. So when we think about environmental and social risks in our supply chain and kind of investing in the platforms to help us identify where those risks are, that costs money up front, and that's not necessarily going to generate new business. But if we have a disruption in that supply chain because of a huge spill or child or forced labor or something like that, that's a cost, not only a financial cost potentially, but a reputational cost to this company. So no, our private equity owners are not looking at this as charity, but they recognize that this is a must-have. Our customers are demanding it, and we're seeing more so now than ever when we have top-to-tops with our customers who are the largest, most admirable brands in the world. Sustainability is sitting at that table, and there's been more than one occasion where I've been asked to go first. And that has an impact in the boardroom, where you just cannot avoid putting attention here. But they recognize. I think both of our owners are incredibly trusting, and I'm sure the hook will come out and I will get yanked if it looks like I'm just recommending expenditures that make no sense. So,
well, what you said makes sense. I think there are a lot of companies that care about that, and I don't know that the general public understands. It's a pretty high percentage of companies, I think, that care about balancing all that. It's just in talking to people and getting to know folks from a lot of different companies. So it almost becomes a competitive advantage when you can show your impact in this area.
It's 100% a competitive advantage, and it's something that also is really important to our employees. And so, you think externally about our stakeholders, but when especially with employees even easily younger than myself, a company's purpose and how it behaves towards its people and the communities in which it is situated makes a difference to people when they're thinking about who they want to work for, and that makes a difference to your bottom line too.
you have some really ambitious 2030 targets. Maybe give us kind of a couple of the high points of that, and then the follow-up question to that. I read up on them, and I'm curious, what are the big hurdles that you're facing right now to hit those? So run us through that real quick.
Sure. So I think I already mentioned climate. So climate change is one of the greatest risks to our business and businesses all around the world. And so we've set very aggressive emissions reduction targets that have been validated by the Science Based Targets Initiative, which is really the gold standard for corporate climate action. And so by 2030, we are aiming for a 42% reduction in our emissions from a 2021 baseline. And that's our direct emissions, things from, our electricity use and the fuels we burn. And then also a 30% reduction in what we call our scope 3 emissions, which is our value chain. And it's where we have the least amount of control. So talk about challenge. That's going to be a huge challenge. But we're also banking on the fact that we have customers that are ambitious and we have suppliers that know that they've got to move in this direction too, to be able to hit that. But that one's going to be tough for us. I think you mentioned in your intro, we have a goal that the majority of our facilities will achieve zero waste by 2030, and that's ensuring that less than 10% of all the waste that we produce ends up in landfills or even going to waste to energy. So that's really thinking up front about how can we design this out. In our people space, having a workforce that is highly engaged and where everyone feels like they come to work and they belong is important. So we've set some very high goals there around engagement and belonging scores that we look at annually. And there's lots of training and deployment of strategies through our people organization, which is fantastic in that people space. And also in our product pillar, some really grand big bets that also rely on great partnership with our customers. And one of those being in our consumer products and proprietary lines, to ensure that at a minimum 75% of our solutions are recyclable, reusable, refillable, and or made from recycled materials. And so that's really reducing the impact that our products are going to have at their end of life. And that's really important to us. And then we've also said, and I mentioned that something that differentiates Technomark is how early we step into the process. But we have said that we want to lead sustainable design in the healthcare space, because that's really where you can have the greatest impact. And we have the 60 plus material scientists, designers, engineers, and others to make that happen. So lots of lofty goals. But not so much that I don't think we can achieve them. We may get to 2030 and be like, oh my gosh, we totally missed the mark. But part of my role is to communicate very transparently to all of our stakeholders how we're doing, not only the success we're having, but the problems that we're running into and how we're addressing those. Because I've found, and also from working in the advocacy community, is that if you make it really clear that you are sincere and you are trying, it's not so much about winning, it's more about evolving, more about advancing.
Modernization, integration, infrastructure, AI readiness. Onin Technology helps industrial IT leaders build momentum without the resume bloat or vendor babysitting. We deliver talent vetted by real subject matter experts, scoped project teams built for results, and consulting from tech leaders who've done the work. Contract to hire, direct hire, or statement of work, we do what fits. Ready to move? So are we. Visit onintechnology.com.
So I don't know the corporate structure, how much with the international, are those standards applied to your operations in Mexico and China as well, or is that a U.S. based thing, or how does that work?
This is global.
Further complicating things, I'm sure.
Yeah, but I am so lucky, and I've learned this from getting out from behind my desk and going to our facilities. We have so many dedicated associates that sometimes they get ahead of me. A lot of times they're ahead of me. So if corporate says, we're going to do this, and you explain why it's important, why it matters, like, they're off and running. And I love just giving our teams the ability to innovate and the ability to be creative in how they meet the KPIs, how they meet their site-specific targets that we've set out for them. So it's really less challenging than you would think. I mean, I think we have some differences in regulations in the different areas, but nothing that has slowed us down. If anything, it's where you get really energized and excited about the potential.
So thinking back over your career, do you have a favorite failure? Something that happened that you learned a particularly useful lesson on, or maybe something that puts you in a little different direction along the way?
I would say that one would be probably early on in my leadership roles. I came into an organization and I love strategy. I love developing and deploying strategy. And so I came in and took a look at my program area and very quickly knew, or thought I knew, the changes that need to happen. And had I did have tunnel vision, because I was looking ahead and knowing where I wanted to be and what I needed to do to get there. And so I moved forward with implementing that because I could. And I didn't stop along the way to consult, to listen to people, and to seek the right advice. And making those changes the way I did backfired on me. And I think everybody's been there. And it really cost me some trust, and it really slowed down my ability to be successful. And it showed me that no matter how right the strategy is, if you don't have alignment, it's going to fail. And in my job today in sustainability, we're close to $1 billion company. I have a team of myself and one other person globally. So I've got to make a lot of friends. And that's really working cross-functionally and listening to people and listening what's important to them, and listening to them tell you what the impact might be of us going at things a certain way before we act. I very collaborative in my leadership style as a result of that, because I got burned.
Yeah, I'm just in the last few years discovering the power of like true curiosity. I don't know what it is. I think when you're younger, you feel like you gotta have the answers, and it takes a little while to settle into have enough confidence to be open, I think, So what advice would you give to someone who is getting ready maybe to graduate school now like you were, and has a similar heart for a similar type of impact? What advice? You've given us great advice, but is there another piece of advice you'd give that young person that's in a similar spot you were back when you graduated?
I don't have a master's. I just have a bachelor's degree, and I was too busy doing to make time to go to go do a master's or pursue a PhD or whatever. I wanted to learn on the job. I think times have changed, and if I was going back now, I would pursue a master's degree or maybe even an MBA. But my experience trumped a lot of that back then. So I would still, though, tell graduates while they're young and while they don't have families and other financial obligations to expose themselves to as many different angles of the profession that they want to be in. Go out and catch snakes like I did. Go work for an environmental policy firm like I did. Go into philanthropy. Try out the nonprofit world. And through all that, you are learning different things, and you're beginning to build and stretch different muscles that later on in life are going to make you super versatile and super attuned to what it is that you do best. And even more importantly than getting lots of different experience is, and this is nothing new, building a very robust network of people that you can call on and that they can call on you. Because there is no way I would have gotten where I am today without the relationships I've built, the people I know, and that all came from genuine interest in them, and then also their willingness to advocate for me along the way. So those two things, absolutely critical. And have fun, you know. I mean, I think we get so, I was thinking back to like when I was coming out of college, and you know, you're so stressed. There's all this anxiety because you think you just need to hurry up, and the only constant we have is change. And so you have to figure out not how to feel like you have to control everything. And your journey is unique. And I had a mentor once tell me, because I was a little frustrated. I jumped quicker than I wanted to from one job to the next and was afraid how that was going to look on my CV. And she said to me, your experience, your story is how you want to tell it. And so that was so reassuring to me and also very empowering.
That's great. Okay, let's land it there. All right. Before we go, how can folks connect with you, find out more about Technimark, maybe explore opportunities to come work with you guys? What's the best place? We'll put it in the show notes, but if you want to give us that, that'd be great.
Yeah, so our website is technomark.com, and last year we did a full overhaul of that, including a rebrand, which I was heavily involved in to position sustainability right there in the middle of our purpose. So check that out. We're on LinkedIn and Facebook, and you know, people can just reach out to me directly. I mean, we're that kind of business, and so I'm always happy to hear from people that are either starting out or even further on in their career, because that's how I learn and how I grow too.
Well, thank you so much, Katie. This has been great.
I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Listeners, thanks for tuning in. Until next time, keep it real.
Thank you for listening. This podcast is powered by Onin, the staffing partner delivering real results for manufacturing, logistics, and food processing companies nationwide. To learn more, visit www.oningroup.com. Until next time, keep it real.